another deal fell apart, who's to blame? You are, because you need a better contract to close process. And if that is you, then guess what, bestie? I am here to the rescue, because in this episode, I am going to break down to you the exact system you need to have in your contract to close process to make sure that stuff gets done. Now, I'm a little passionate about this because I can't tell you how many times I'm looking in a Facebook group and I will hear somebody say, you know, I've had 3 deals this year and they all fell apart, and the agent just thinks that it just magically happened, that the lender didn't do their job or the client didn't do their job, and at the end of the day, it was actually you. It was actually not having effective systems in place to get your client from contract to close. That is where the gap was, but we are going to fill the gap right now. And in the spirit of transparency, let me tell you something. I cannot tell you how long I operated my business thinking that the hardest part was getting the people to contract. Like, I almost wiped my hands of it. Like, my job is done. And all I need to do is show up to closing, because if everybody else do their job, then we gonna close the deal, right? Actually wrong. As the real estate agent, you are really the puppeteer, right? You are the one that is pulling the strings and making sure that everything functions smoothly. And as a matter of fact, in every consultation that I have, whether it's with a buyer or with a seller, those are the exact words that I use. Like, I am here to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. And because of that, you need a contract to close process. Now, before I even go all the way into it, I have a gift for you. I have email templates that you can use to help you enhance the contract to close process with your clients. Go to rosemarylewis.com/email templates. Now, friend, make sure that you go ahead and actually edit them, right? Like, to make sure that they match your contract to close process. But that is my gift to you to get you started. Now, speaking of getting started, when it is time to implement a contract to close system, if you just read the contract, I'm a little guilty of it, it really will help us understand exactly what needs to happen when. And if you go through the contract and pay attention to those timelines and create like a checklist based on the timelines so that you can update your client, it is going to be a game changer. So a system that you want to have in place, like once you receive the contract, okay? The very first thing after the contract is executed and you receive it, we want to make sure that we are distributing it out to all of the necessary parties that need to have a copy of the contract. So that is the lender, that is the listing agent, that is the buyer's agent, that is the title company, that is the closing attorney if you're in an attorney state, that is your clients. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I've seen agents that they forget to actually send their clients the actual contract to say, we did it, we got the house. So making sure that you are distributing the contract out to everybody. And then it can either be you or your transaction coordinator, and I'll talk about a transaction coordinator in a little bit. They are a game changer and they help you in this process. But within, I would say 24 hours, actually less than that, of the contract going out. So you need to send a timeline. So let's pretend that you have a buyer client. You need to send a timeline to them to let them know that the contract was received, let them know exactly when and how earnest money has to be received, when they need to schedule their inspection, if there is an option or a due diligence period, you have those times. When is the financing option up? If there is an HOA contingency, if there is a leaseback, when the estimated closing, like your buyers and your sellers, they need a specific timeline of when all of these things happen. Now, there are some title companies and some closing attorneys, and definitely your transaction coordinators, they a lot of times will pick this up and do this for you. And I'm not saying that you can't depend on them, but ultimately, this is you and this is your business. And what if you're working with a new title company this time, right? Your normal title company sends out a timeline, but now you're working with a new title company. You just need to have a system or a process in place to make sure that this is going to be received, okay? And then This is the big system, friend. Now you just have to follow the timeline, okay? We have to follow the timeline and stay ahead of the dates of when things are due, and make sure that you are communicating with your client and you're communicating with all of the other parties involved, because sometimes we think we only have to communicate with our clients, but we need to also communicate with the lender. We need to communicate with the title company, with the other agent, to make sure that we are following the timeline. Because let me tell you what happens when you're communicating. I hear all the time people say that deals are falling apart. A lot of times deals fall apart when there is radio silence, right? When the other end has a hiccup or something going on, and because you're just in la la land thinking that they're doing their work and everything's going to be fine, if we're not asking the right questions, if we're not communicating, and if we're not following up with these other people based on what's supposed to happen contractually, then it falls on you. I always say, and this is one of the things that I say in my seller consultations, like, hey, even though you're the seller, myself and my transaction coordinator, we are going to be following up with the lender to make sure for the buyer, if they are meeting their financing deadline, if so much time has passed and we haven't gotten a request for an appraisal, if we haven't heard back from inspections, when is the appraisal coming back? Even though that's not technically our side of the deal or our job, we want to make sure that we have emails that are going out, that we have communication that's going out, and that we are paying attention to those timelines. Because I'm telling you, if closing is in 2 weeks and the appraisal hasn't gone out, and you haven't noticed that hasn't happened, then that's a red flag that you may be able to get in front of, instead of waiting for the deal to fall apart 3 weeks before closing or 2 days before closing, okay? So making sure that you are following the timelines and you're sending out the communication effectively is going to be a game changer. So you're going to pull out the contract, you're going to look at all of the dates, like look at your calendar. If it says 10 days from execution, then you're going to say, okay, if today is July 10th, what's 10 days from now? Okay, so in 10 days, this needs to happen. In 12 days, this needs to happen. And you are going to outline those dates and send them to your clients and to yourself. Now, let me tell you something that my transaction coordinator does, which she is worth her weight in gold, that I absolutely love. Anytime we go under contract for something, not only is she sending a timeline, but she's actually sending me calendar invites for all of the things that need to happen on the contract. This is such a game changer system that you need to have in place. So let's just say it is the beginning of the week. When I go to my Google Calendar and I see what's coming up for the week, I can notice that, okay, 123 Main Street, they have an appraisal due on Friday. They have an HOA document due on Wednesday. So if it's Monday, right, and we have not received the HOA documents or we haven't heard anything about it, we have an opportunity to have a conversation with the title company or the closing attorney to see, do we need to extend this contingency or are we going to make the deadline? Because ultimately, every single time we miss a deadline in the contract, your client can be exposed, right? Their earnest money can be at risk. So making sure that you're paying attention to those timelines and you have several reminders so that you are reminded, so that your clients are reminded, it is going to be a huge, huge, huge benefit for you and your business. Other systems that you want to have in place during the contract to close process, in addition to paying attention to the timelines, are, okay, what is going to be your process of updating your clients, okay? So for instance, a lot of times with sellers, once we go under contract and there is, everything is working with the buyers, it can feel a little quiet. So do you have a day, are you going to be updating your sellers every Tuesday so that they know, hey, we called and the appraiser should be making their appointments today? Or the repairs that we agreed upon, they need to be completed by Thursday because that's when we are due to give the receipts. Do not go radio silent. And honestly, that is one of the biggest complaints that you have from clients, is that they feel like after they went under contract, the communication started to cease. And I get it, because this is also what has to happen when you're under contract with one client. is that you can't be so focused on, getting this contract to close that you forget to be out here prospecting for your business. So you definitely have to communicate and have systems and processes in place where you are taking care of the clients that you are currently in escrow with. But you have to have time and leverage in place so that you are still doing your daily money-making activities. Because guess what? When that thing closes, you need to have something else coming behind it. And this is why, if I have to give any piece of advice for the best contract to close process, it is to hire a transaction coordinator. When you get a great transaction coordinator, they are going to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and all of the T's are crossed. And their sole purpose is to make sure that we are making deadlines, that y'all are communicating with each other, and that nothing gets missed in the contract. For most of us, okay, when you hire a transaction coordinator or a transaction coordinator company, this is the best part. They want to get paid at closing. So for the fee that they charge at closing, I can tell you it is 1,000,000% worth it. And this was one of the big mindset shifts I had to make. In the beginning, I just thought a transaction coordinator was just somebody turning in paperwork to the brokerage. And they are so much more than that. They are keeping me abreast of what's happening so that we can deliver an exceptional client experience. And for someone like myself who, like the analytics and paperwork and all of that is not my strong suit, to have somebody that I'm paying to do that part so I can do what I do best, which is the client service piece, it is a gold mine. But just because you have a transaction coordinator, that doesn't excuse you not to be paying attention to the dates and the timelines of the contract. It is just another bonus. And speaking of client experience, when you are under contract, what are some of the surprises and delights that you can send out to your clients, okay? So when you're under contract, like I like to send out a little something like when we get out of option period or when the appraisal comes in, right? Once we are at a certain part of the process, I like to send moving labels, right? Encouraging them to get things packed up and moved out because we are on to our bigger and best and next thing. So these are just little nudges. You don't have to send something every single time, but can you send one or two small gifts throughout the process that will have you stand out and keep your clients excited and engaged for their next step? And then finally, what's your process for closing day, okay? Because we're talking about for contract to close. So for closing day, I'm going to encourage you, everybody thinks about this differently, but I am a gifter for closing day. So with the closing day process, are you going to show up to the title company? Do the clients understand? Like, I don't go to all my closings anymore. A lot of my closings now are for sellers, and my sellers are like on the go. They're getting notaries at 6 o'clock in the morning and they're moving around. So I don't get to go to every single closing, but that doesn't mean that we don't celebrate every single closing. So what does that look like? Are you going to make sure that you're ordering things or that you're showing up with a gift or even after the fact? What does that look like to support them? And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that they understand that they are not just a client for this transaction, but they are a client for life. So don't be like Rosemary, right? The old Rosemary who used to literally get something under contract and just kind of chill into closing day. You want to make sure that you are on top of the dates, that you are surprising and delighting your clients throughout the process, and you make the actual closing something memorable and stand out as their forever go-to real estate bestie. Now, bestie, don't forget to head on over to rosemarylewis.com/email templates to get those contract to close email templates. And this is what I want you to do. Hop in comments. What is another system that you need to have in place so that I can share with you exactly how I'm doing it in my business to make your business easier?